The blood trailing down her leg told Victoria Malone she had maybe an hour before the infection turned her delirious, and the three outlaws tracking her through the Dakota Territory badlands would find her corpse come morning. She pressed her torn skirt against the gash on her thigh, courtesy of a jagged rock during her desperate slide down a ravine 2 hours back, and tried not to think about how her father's wagon train had been slaughtered just after dawn. The August heat of 1876 made everything worse, turning her mouth to cotton and her thoughts sluggish. She could hear the distant voices of the men who had done this, their laughter carrying on the wind as they searched for her, the only witness to their massacre. Victoria had been gathering wildflowers a half-mile from camp when the shooting started. She had run toward the sound at first, then away when she crested the hill and saw the bodies, saw her father trying to shield her mother, saw the futility of it all. Now she stumbled through the scrubland, each step sending fresh agony through her wounded leg, her vision swimming. The sun hung low on the horizon, painting the sky in shades of amber and rust that reminded her of the blood she had seen that morning. She collapsed behind a cluster of rocks, her breathing ragged. The wound had stopped bleeding as much, but she knew that was not necessarily good. Her dress, once a respectable blue calico, was torn and filthy. She was 20 years old and had survived the journey from Ohio to the Dakota Territory, only to die within spitting distance of Fargo, where her family had been headed to start a new life. The irony tasted bitter. The sound of hoofbeats made her freeze. Not the chaotic thunder of multiple horses, but the steady, measured pace of a single rider. Victoria pressed herself against the rock, hardly daring to breathe. If this was one of the outlaws, she had nothing left to fight with. Her father's pistol had been in the wagon, and she had run with only the clothes on her back and the small knife she kept in her boot. Her fingers found the knife's handle now, though she knew it would do little good. The rider came into view as the sun dipped lower. He sat tall in the saddle, a cowboy by the look of him, with a dusty brown hat pulled low over his face and a rifle resting across his lap. His horse was a sturdy bay, picking its way carefully through the rocks. The man scanned the landscape with the kind of attention that spoke of experience, someone who knew how to read terrain and trouble in equal measure. Victoria made her decision in a heartbeat. She could hide and hope he passed by, then likely die alone in the badlands, or she could take her chances. She pushed herself up, nearly crying out as her leg protested, and stumbled into the open. The cowboy's rifle came up smooth and fast, but he did not fire. His eyes, she could see now, were a striking blue against his sun-weathered face. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with dark hair curling out from under his hat, and a jaw covered in several days' worth of stubble. He took in her appearance in one quick assessment, noting the blood, the torn dress, the desperation written across her face. "Help me," Victoria managed to say before her leg gave out entirely. The cowboy was off his horse before she hit the ground, catching her with strong arms. Up close, she could see the concern etched in the lines around his eyes, the set of his mouth that spoke of someone who had seen hard things and carried them quietly. "Easy now," he said, his voice low and steady. "I've got you. Where are you hurt?" "My leg," she gasped. "But there are men, 3 of them. They killed my family, my father's wagon train. They are looking for me." The words tumbled out in a rush. The cowboy's expression hardened. He glanced back the way she had come, then at the failing light. "Can you ride?" "I think so." He lifted her as though she weighed nothing, settling her onto his horse before swinging up behind her. His arm came around her waist, holding her steady against his chest. "There is a line shack about 3 miles east. We can make it before full dark if we push. Hold on to the saddle horn." Victoria gripped the horn with both hands as the cowboy urged his horse into a swift trot. Every jolt sent pain shooting through her leg, but she bit down on her lower lip and endured it. Behind them, she heard a shout, then another. The outlaws had spotted them. The cowboy heard it too. His arm tightened around her waist. "How badly do you want to live?" "Badly enough," Victoria said through gritted teeth. "Then hold on." He leaned forward and the horse surged into a gallop. The world became a blur of motion and pain. Victoria focused on breathing, on staying conscious, on not falling from the saddle. The cowboy's chest was solid against her back, his arm an iron band keeping her secure. She could feel the steady thump of his heart, the measured way he guided the horse through the treacherous terrain even at speed. He rode like someone born to it, reading the land in the dying light with an instinct that went beyond sight. Behind them, the outlaws gave chase. Victoria risked a glance back and saw 3 riders pushing their horses hard. They were gaining. The cowboy saw it too, but his expression never changed, his focus absolute. He guided the bay around a stand of cottonwoods, through a dry creek bed, up a rise that made Victoria's stomach lurch. The horse never faltered, trusting its rider completely. The line shack appeared like a miracle, a small square building of weathered wood nestled against a hillside. The cowboy brought the horse right up to the door, dismounting in one fluid motion and pulling Victoria down after him. He half carried, half dragged her inside, then immediately went back for his rifle and the saddlebags. The interior was sparse but clean. A single room with a wood stove, a narrow cot, a table and chair. The cowboy deposited Victoria on the cot, then moved to bar the door. The building had no windows, just a single small gap near the roofline for ventilation. He checked the bar twice, ensuring it was secure, then lit a lantern that sat on the table. "Let me see the leg," he said, bringing the lantern over. Victoria hesitated, then lifted her skirt to expose the wound. In the lamplight, it looked worse than she had imagined, the gash deep and angry, the edges already showing signs of infection. The cowboy studied it with a clinical eye, then met her gaze. "This needs cleaning and stitching. I have got supplies in my saddlebag, but I will not lie to you, it is going to hurt." "Everything already hurts," Victoria said, trying for levity and failing. Something like respect flickered in his eyes. He retrieved his saddlebag and pulled out a leather roll of medical supplies, a bottle of whiskey and a clean cloth. "What is your name?" "Victoria Malone. And you?" "Dalton Nash." He poured whiskey over his hands, then over the cloth. "I am going to clean this first. You might want to bite down on something." Victoria nodded, folding a corner of her skirt between her teeth. Dalton knelt beside the cot and carefully began cleaning the wound. The whiskey burned like liquid fire, and Victoria's vision whited out for a moment, but she did not scream. She would not give the outlaws outside the satisfaction if they were close enough to hear. Dalton worked quickly and efficiently, his hands gentle despite the necessary pain he was causing. "You said wagon train," he said quietly, clearly trying to distract her. "How many were there?" 6 wagons, Victoria managed around the cloth. 23 people total, families heading to Fargo to homestead. She squeezed her eyes shut against the memory. "The outlaws came just after dawn. We thought they were travelers at first. My father went out to greet them." Dalton's jaw tightened, but his hands never faltered. He threaded a needle he had sterilized in the whiskey. "This is the worst part." The stitching was indeed worse. Victoria focused on Dalton's face, on the concentration written there, on the careful way he worked to cause as little damage as possible while closing the wound. 7 stitches later, he tied off the thread and bandaged the leg with clean cloth from his supplies. "You did well," he said, sitting back on his heels. Better than some men I have seen. I did not have much choice. Victoria's voice was hoarse. She accepted the whiskey bottle when he offered it, taking a long swallow that burned all the way down but helped with the residual pain. Outside, they heard horses. Dalton was on his feet instantly, rifle in hand, moving to stand beside the door. Victoria forced herself to sit up, reaching for the knife in her boot. If this was the end, she would not go down without fighting. A voice called out from the darkness. "We know you are in there, girl, and whoever you picked up, come on out and we will make it quick." Dalton said nothing, his eyes on the door, his body still. Another voice, younger, said, "We can burn you out. That shack will go up like tinder." Victoria's heart hammered against her ribs. She looked at Dalton, expecting to see fear or resignation, but his expression was calm, almost calculating. He glanced at her, then back at the door. "How many rounds you figure they have left?" he asked quietly. It took Victoria a moment to realize he was talking to her. "I do not know." They shot up the wagon train pretty thoroughly, so maybe not as many as they would like. Dalton moved to the stove, checking it. "This vents out the back into the hillside. Clever construction. They can try to smoke us out, but it will not work quickly. What are we going to do?" Dalton checked his rifle, then pulled a revolver from his belt and checked that too. "We are going to wait. Those boys out there, they are thinking they have the upper hand. They probably do, but they also just rode hard chasing us. Their horses are tired and it is getting cold. Come midnight, they are going to be miserable and questioning their choices. You want to wait them out. I want to stay alive, and I want to keep you alive." Dalton's gaze was steady. "Right now, that means staying put and conserving our energy. You have lost blood and you need rest. I will keep watch." As if to punctuate his point, a gunshot rang out, the bullet thudding into the heavy wooden door but not penetrating. Dalton did not even flinch. Victoria found herself believing him, this stranger who had pulled her from the badlands and stitched her wounds with steady hands. She settled back onto the cot, her body suddenly heavy with exhaustion. "Why did you help me?" Dalton was quiet for a long moment. "I found a wagon train burned out 3 days back. Everyone dead, looked like it had been that way for a week or more. I have been following the trail since, trying to catch up to whoever did it. When I saw you, I thought maybe I had a chance to get it right this time." "To save someone, you mean? To do something that matters." He glanced at her, and in the lamplight she saw something haunted in his expression. "I have been drifting for too long, Victoria. Working cattle drives, taking odd jobs, never staying anywhere. My parents died when I was 17. Cholera took them within days of each other. I have been moving ever since, like if I stay still too long the grief will catch up." He shook his head. "Sorry, you do not need to hear about that." "I think I do," Victoria said softly. "I think I need to know I am not the only one who has lost everything." The night stretched out long and cold. The outlaws tried once more to shoot through the door, then seemed to settle in for a siege. Dalton divided his attention between watching the door and checking on Victoria, making sure her wound was not bleeding through the bandage, offering her water from his canteen and jerky from his supplies. She dozed fitfully, jerking awake at every sound, only to find him still standing guard, patient as stone. Sometime around midnight, Victoria woke to find Dalton sitting at the table, his rifle across his lap, his head bowed. For a moment she thought he was praying, then realized he was simply exhausted. She pushed herself up carefully. "You should rest," she whispered. "Let me watch for a while." Dalton looked up and she saw the weariness in his face. "I have been in tighter spots than this. I am fine." "You are dead on your feet. Even half an hour would help." She limped over to take the chair across from him. "I am awake anyway. My leg is throbbing too much to sleep properly." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Half an hour. If you hear anything at all, you wake me." "I will." Dalton stretched out on the cot, his hand resting on his revolver. Victoria watched him fall asleep within minutes, the deep sleep of someone who had learned to take rest whenever it was offered. She turned her attention to the door, straining to hear any sound from outside. The silence was almost worse than the threats had been. She could not tell if the outlaws were still out there or if they had left. Part of her hoped desperately that they had given up, but she knew better. Men who murdered an entire wagon train would not balk at waiting out two people in a lined shack. She studied Dalton's face in the lamplight. He looked younger in sleep, the hard edges softened. There was strength in the lines of his jaw, in the breadth of his shoulders, but also something gentle in the curve of his mouth. He had saved her life without hesitation, had tended her wound with care, had offered comfort without expectation of anything in return. In her 20 years, Victoria had met plenty of men, and few of them had shown that kind of basic decency. More than half an hour passed before Dalton stirred, coming awake all at once with the alertness of someone accustomed to danger. He sat up, orienting himself, then looked at her. "Anything?" "Nothing. Complete silence." He moved to the door, pressing his ear against it, listening. After a full minute, he straightened. "They are still out there. I can hear a horse moving, sounds nervous. They are trying to be quiet, but they are there. What do we do when the sun comes up?" "Depends on what they do." Dalton checked his rifle again, a nervous habit or perhaps just something to occupy his hands. "If they rush the door, we have a problem. This bar is solid, but 3 men putting their weight against it could break through eventually. If they stay back and try to wait us out, we have a few days' worth of supplies between what I had in my saddlebags and what is stored here." Victoria wrapped her arms around herself. The night had grown cold, and her torn dress offered little protection. Dalton noticed, shrugging out of his jacket and draping it around her shoulders before she could protest. It was warm from his body heat and smelled of leather and sage and something indefinably him. "You will freeze," she said. "I have been colder." He moved back to the table and she joined him there. "Tell me about your family. What were they like?" It hurt to talk about them, but Victoria found she wanted to. She told him about her father, who had been a school teacher in Ohio before the call of Western land became too strong to ignore. About her mother, who had made the best apple pie in 3 counties and sang while she did the washing. About her younger brother Thomas, only 15, who had been so excited to see real cowboys and Indians. "They were good people," she finished, her voice thick. "They did not deserve what happened to them. No one does." Dalton's hand covered hers on the table, warm and solid. "But they would be proud of you, Victoria. You survived. You kept fighting. That takes courage. I ran away. You lived. There is no shame in that." His thumb brushed across her knuckles, a small gesture that sent unexpected warmth through her. "You witnessed something terrible, and you have every right to make sure it is not forgotten. Those outlaws need to face justice. What if we do not make it out of here?" Dalton's eyes met hers, and she saw determination there, fierce and unwavering. "We will. I give you my word on that." Dawn came slowly, gray light filtering through the ventilation gap. Dalton had Victoria stay on the cot while he carefully unbarred the door, opening it just a crack to peer outside. She saw his shoulders tense, then relax slightly. "They are about 50 yards out, camped behind some rocks," he reported, closing and barring the door again. "Looks like they settled in for a long wait. Their horses are picketed nearby, and I can see smoke from a small fire." "So what now?" Dalton turned to face her, leaning back against the door. "Now we figure out how to turn this situation to our advantage. They think they have us trapped, but being trapped also means we know exactly where they are. They have to maintain a perimeter. which means spreading themselves thin. And unless they pack supplies, which I doubt given how fast they came after us, they are running low on food and water. You sound like you have done this before. I rode with the army for a few years, fighting in small skirmishes near the end of the Indian campaigns. Learned a lot about patience and tactics. He did not sound proud of it, just matter of fact. The key to any siege is knowing when to hold and when to move. Right now, we hold. They are hoping desperation will make us do something foolish. We wait until they get desperate instead. Victoria nodded, trying to match his calm. Her leg still throbbed, but the pain had settled into something more manageable, a constant ache rather than the sharp agony of the night before. She changed the subject, needing distraction from both the pain and their situation. You said you have been drifting since your parents died. That was 8 years ago. About that, yeah. I am 25 now. Dalton moved to the stove, feeding in some of the split wood stacked nearby. Figured I would boil some water, make coffee if you want some. Might as well be comfortable while we wait. Coffee sounds perfect. He worked with the easy efficiency of someone who had spent years taking care of himself. The coffee, when it was ready, was strong and bitter and exactly what Victoria needed. They sat at the small table, nursing their cups, and talked. Dalton told her about the cattle drives he had worked, the long months pushing herds north from Texas to the railheads in Kansas. About sleeping under the stars and eating dust for weeks at a time. About the camaraderie of the trail and the loneliness that always crept in after the drive ended, and everyone scattered to their next job. Victoria told him about life in Ohio, about teaching younger children to read at her father's school, about the small town where everyone knew everyone else's business, about the dreams she had harbored of seeing more of the world, dreams that had turned nightmarish in the space of a few terrible minutes. "What were you planning to do in Fargo?" Dalton asked. My father had filed a claim for land just outside the town. We were going to build a homestead, start a farm. He said North Dakota territory was the future, that people were flooding in to claim land. I was going to help with the farm and maybe start a school of my own eventually. She stared into her coffee cup. Seems foolish now. Dreams are never foolish. Sometimes they just change shape. Dalton refilled her cup from the pot on the stove. When we get out of here, what will you do? When, not if. When, he said firmly. I do not make promises lightly, Victoria. I said we are getting out of here, and we are. She wanted to believe him with a ferocity that surprised her. This man she had known for less than a day had become her anchor in a world that had gone mad. I suppose I will still go to Fargo, see about my father's claim. I am his only heir, so it should pass to me. She paused. Do you think that sounds crazy, going through with a dead man's dream? I think it sounds brave. Dalton's gaze held hers. I think it sounds like you are someone who does not give up easily. That is a rare quality. The moment stretched between them, charged with something Victoria could not quite name. Then Dalton straightened, his attention snapping back to the door. She had not heard anything, but clearly he had. He grabbed his rifle and moved to press his ear against the wood. What is it? She whispered. They are arguing. I can just make out the words. Sounds like two of them want to rush us and the third is trying to talk them out of it. He listened for another moment. The smart one just mentioned that they do not know how much ammunition we have and it might be a trap. Is it a trap? Not yet, but give me a minute and it could be. Dalton's mouth curved in something that was not quite a smile. How is your aim with a rifle? Decent. My father taught me to shoot rabbits. Good. Here is what we are going to do. He outlined his plan quickly, and Victoria felt her heart rate pick up. It was risky, possibly foolish, but it was better than sitting and waiting to be starved out or burned alive. Dalton positioned himself to one side of the door while Victoria took the other. his rifle in her hands. He kept his revolver and gave her careful instructions. When he gave the signal, she was to open the door just wide enough for her to aim through, then fire 2 quick shots toward the rocks where the outlaws were camped. She did not have to hit anyone, just make them think the people in the shack were well armed and willing to fight. Then she would slam the door closed again while Dalton barred it. 3, 2, 1, Dalton counted down, then nodded. Victoria yanked the door open. The morning sunlight was blinding after the dimness of the shack, but she forced her eyes to adjust, found the rocks where she could see the outlaws' horses, and fired twice. The rifle's kick was worse than she remembered from hunting rabbits, but she kept her footing. Men shouted, diving for cover. "Now," Dalton barked. She slammed the door closed and Dalton dropped the bar in place. Outside, more shouting than silence. "Well done," Dalton said, taking the rifle back. "Now they know we are serious. That buys us time to think." Victoria was shaking, adrenaline flooding her system. "How does shooting at them buy us time?" "Because now they are going to be more careful. Before, we were just prey running scared. Now we are a threat. They will have to approach this differently, which means planning, which means not acting rashly." He checked the rifle, noting how much ammunition he had left. "And while they are planning, we are planning too." The day crawled by with agonizing slowness. Dalton rationed out their supplies, making sure Victoria drank enough water and ate some of the jerky and hardtack he had stored. He changed the bandage on her leg, checking the wound for signs of worsening infection. It looked a bit better, the angry redness fading slightly, and Victoria took that as a good sign. They talked more, filling the silence with stories and questions. Dalton told her about his parents, how his mother had been a seamstress and his father a carpenter, both of them dead within a week of each other when cholera swept through their town. How he had buried them himself because there was no one else left to do it. "I was not much older than your brother," he said quietly. 17 and angry at the world. Joined the army because it seemed like a way to put that anger to use. Spent 3 years fighting, then another 5 drifting. Wasted a lot of time being bitter about things I could not change." "What changed?" Victoria asked. "Nothing dramatic. Just woke up one day and realized I was going to die alone and angry if I did not start living differently. Started trying to help people when I could. Still doing odd jobs, still drifting, but at least trying to leave places better than I found them." He looked at her. "Helping you, that felt right. Like maybe all that drifting was just to get me to the right place at the right time." Victoria felt her throat tighten with emotion. "I am glad you were there. If you had not been, I would be dead right now." "Then I am glad too." His hand found hers again, fingers intertwining. It felt natural, like they had done this 1,000 times before. As afternoon faded toward evening, the outlaws tried a different tactic. One of them approached the shack waving a white cloth tied to a stick, calling out that he wanted to talk. Dalton told Victoria to stay back, then cracked the door open just enough to see out, his revolver held ready. "Talk from there," he called. "Any closer and I shoot." The outlaw stopped about 20 feet from the door. He was younger than Victoria had expected, maybe 30, with a thin mustache and nervous eyes. "We do not want trouble," he said. "Just give us the girl and you can ride out of here." "Not happening," Dalton said flatly. "She is a witness to things she should not have seen. We cannot let her go to the law. Should have thought of that before you murdered innocent people." The outlaw shifted his weight. "Look, we got paid to do a job, nothing personal against those folks. Wrong place, wrong time. You give us the girl, we all walk away." "Who paid you?" Dalton asked. "None of your business." "Made it my business when you came after her." "Who paid you and why?" The outlaw hesitated, clearly not authorized to share that information. "Does not matter." What matters is we cannot leave witnesses. Be reasonable. I am being reasonable. Reasonable says you boys should ride out of here while you still can. Law is going to come looking eventually. Those wagon trains do not just disappear without people asking questions. By the time anyone comes looking, we will be in the next territory, and you two will be dead. The outlaw's voice hardened. Last chance. Give us the girl. Come and take her, Dalton said and shut the door. Victoria had heard the entire exchange from where she stood pressed against the wall. He said they were paid. Someone hired them to attack the wagon train. Sounds like it. Dalton's expression was grim. Which means this was not just random violence. Someone wanted your father's group dead specifically. Any idea why? Victoria racked her brain trying to think. My father was just a schoolteacher. We were not wealthy. None of the families in our group were. We were all just ordinary people trying to start over. What about the land your father claimed? Was there anything special about it? Not that I know of. Just farming land, same as hundreds of other claims. She paused, thinking. Although he did mention in one of his letters that he had gotten a really good deal on the location, said the land agent seemed eager to move the particular plot. Interesting. Dalton checked the ammunition in his revolver, reloading it from a box in his saddlebag. Might be there is something valuable on that land. Might be someone wanted to make sure your family never got there to claim it. But they already killed everyone. Why come after me? Because you are the heir. As long as you are alive, you have rights to that claim. Dead, the land goes back to whoever filed it or whoever controls the land office. He met her eyes. Someone went to a lot of trouble to clear that land. I am betting they do not want you showing up in Fargo to complicate things. The implications of that settled over Victoria like a cold blanket. So they will not stop coming after me. Not until we make them stop, one way or another. Dalton checked the door bar again, then the ventilation gap, ensuring their defenses were as strong as possible. We need to get you to Fargo, to the territorial marshal. You tell your story, file your claim, make it all official and public. Once it is on record, killing you does not solve anyone's problem. But first we have to get out of here alive. First we have to get out of here alive, he agreed. Night fell again, and with it came a new kind of tension. The outlaws were done talking, done waiting. Dalton could sense it in the quality of the silence outside. He made Victoria lie down on the cot and try to rest while he kept watch, but she could not sleep, her mind racing. Dalton, she said into the darkness. If something happens to me, will you make sure people know what happened to my family? Make sure they are not just forgotten. Nothing is going to happen to you. His voice was firm. But yes, if it came to that, I would make sure. I would tell everyone who would listen. Your family would be remembered. Thank you. She was quiet for a moment. You are a good man, Dalton Nash, better than most I have known. I am just someone trying to do the right thing. That is more than most can say. Around midnight, the attack came. Not a direct assault on the door, but something Dalton had half expected and feared more. Smoke began seeping in through the ventilation gap, thick and choking. The outlaws had built up their fire and were funneling the smoke toward the shack, trying to force them out. Dalton moved fast, stuffing the gap with spare cloth from his saddlebag, but it was not enough. Smoke continued to filter in, filling the small space. Victoria was coughing, her eyes watering. Dalton grabbed their canteens and soaked cloths in water, handing one to her to breathe through. We have to go out, Victoria gasped through the cloth. We cannot stay in here. Going out is what they want. They will shoot us the moment we step through that door. Better than choking to death in here. Dalton's mind raced. She was right. They could not stay, but charging out would be suicide. Unless they had an advantage the outlaws were not expecting. He moved to the back wall of the shack, examining it in the lamplight. The structure was old, the wood weathered. He pulled out his knife and tested one of the boards. It gave slightly, dry rot, making it weaker than it appeared. "Help me with this," he said. Together, working as quietly as possible while the smoke grew thicker, they pried at the boards. One came loose, then another. The gap was narrow but might be enough for them to squeeze through one at a time. Outside this wall was the hillside, rocky and sloped. If they could get out unseen, they might be able to circle around to where the outlaws had picketed their horses. "You first," Dalton said. "I will hand you the rifle and supplies, then follow. What if they see us? Then we run like hell." "But they are expecting us to come out the front. With luck, they are all watching that direction." He helped her to the gap. "Can you manage with your leg?" "I will have to." Victoria squeezed through the opening, biting back a gasp as rough wood scraped her arms. She emerged on the hillside, the night air cold and blessedly clear after the smoke. Dalton passed the rifle through, then the saddlebag, then his revolver. He had more trouble fitting through the gap, his shoulders broader than Victoria's, but he managed it with some creative maneuvering and only a few whispered curses. They crouched against the hillside, letting their eyes adjust to the darkness. Dalton pointed toward where the horses were picketed, about 40 yards to the south. They moved slowly, careful of loose rocks that might give them away. Victoria's legs screamed protest with every step, but she pushed through it. Behind them, the shack was fully engulfed in smoke now, the outlaws' fire doing its work. She could hear the men calling to each other, confident they had won. They were 15 feet from the horses when one of the outlaws came around the rocks to check on the animals. He saw them immediately, letting out a shout and going for his gun. Dalton was faster. His revolver barked once in the darkness and the man went down. "Run!" Dalton shouted, grabbing Victoria's hand and pulling her toward the horses. Behind them, the other 2 outlaws were coming, drawn by the shot. Dalton fired twice more, not aiming to hit but to slow them down. They reached the picketed horses and he sliced the rope with his knife, freeing all 3 animals. He boosted Victoria onto the nearest horse, then swung up behind her, wheeling the animal around. Gunfire erupted, muzzle flashes bright in the darkness. Dalton kicked the horse into a gallop, the other 2 horses scattering in different directions, adding to the confusion. A bullet whined past Victoria's ear, close enough that she felt the displacement of air. Then they were away, the horse stretching out into a run, putting distance between them and the outlaws. They rode hard for an hour, Dalton pushing the horse as fast as he dared in the darkness. Only when he was certain they were not being followed did he slow, the horse blowing hard, its sides heaving. He guided them into a small canyon where a trickle of water ran, letting the horse drink while he helped Victoria down. "Are you hurt?" he asked, running his hands over her arms, checking for wounds he might have missed in the chaos. "No, I am fine." Victoria was shaking, adrenaline and fear catching up with her. "You shot one of them." "Had to, he would have shot us." Dalton's face was grim. "First time I have shot a man in 5 years. Thought I was done with that." Victoria laid her hand against his cheek, feeling the tension in his jaw. "You saved us. Again. You keep saving us." He covered her hand with his, turning his face into her palm. "I told you we would get out. I keep my promises." They stood like that for a long moment, the night settling around them. Then Dalton gently released her hand and moved to check their supplies. They had the saddlebag, the rifle, his revolver, and one very tired horse. It would have to be enough. "Can you ride for another few hours?" he asked. "I want to put as much distance between us and them as possible before we stop. I can manage. That is becoming your motto." There was warmth in his voice, something like admiration. They rode through the rest of the night, Dalton keeping them to terrain that would hide their trail. Victoria dozed against his chest, trusting him to keep them safe, exhaustion finally overcoming fear. When dawn broke, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, they were miles away from the line shack, following a river north. Dalton found a sheltered spot among willows and called a halt. He helped Victoria down, noting the way she favored her injured leg. "Let me look at that wound." All that running and riding might have torn the stitches. He was right. 2 of the stitches had pulled loose, and the bandage was soaked with fresh blood. Dalton cleaned and re-stitched the wound with the same careful attention he had shown before, his hands steady despite having been awake for over a day. Victoria watched his face as he worked, seeing the lines of exhaustion around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "When was the last time you slept?" she asked. "Really slept? Couple of days ago, maybe. I sleep light on the trail." He tied off the last stitch and wrapped a fresh bandage around her thigh. "I will rest when we get to Fargo." "Fargo is still 2 days away at least, and we are riding double on a tired horse. You are going to collapse before we get there." "I am fine." "You are exhausted. Let me keep watch while you rest. Just a few hours." Dalton looked like he wanted to argue, but common sense won out. He nodded slowly. "A few hours. You wake me if anything looks wrong, even if you are not sure." "I will." He stretched out on the ground, using the saddlebag as a pillow, and was asleep almost instantly. Victoria kept watch, the rifle across her lap, listening to the morning sounds of birds and the river's gentle flow. She studied Dalton's sleeping face, this man who had risked everything for a stranger. She was falling in love with him. The realization came quietly, not with trumpets and fanfare, but with the simple certainty of truth. This man who had carried her from the badlands, who had stitched her wounds and defended her life, who had promised they would go slow together rather than abandon her. He had become essential to her in the space of 2 days, and she could not imagine facing what came next without him. But what came next? Even if they made it to Fargo, even if she filed her claim and told the marshal about the massacre, what then? Dalton was a drifter. He had said so himself. He moved from place to place, never staying anywhere long enough to call it home. Why would he stay for her? The morning stretched toward noon. Victoria woke Dalton when the sun was high, knowing he needed more sleep, but also knowing they needed to keep moving. He came awake quickly, orienting himself, checking their surroundings. "All quiet?" he asked, completely. "I do not think they followed us." "They might still be trying, but we have a good lead. With luck, they will give up and cut their losses." He stood, working the stiffness from his shoulders. "How is the leg?" "Hurts, but no worse than before." They shared the last of the jerky and some water, then got back on the horse. The animal was rested enough to continue, but Dalton kept their pace moderate, not wanting to push it too hard. They followed the river north, staying in cover when possible. As they rode, Victoria finally asked the question that had been growing in her mind. "What will you do after we reach Fargo? After I have talked to the marshal?" Dalton was quiet for so long she thought he might not answer. Then he said, "I have been thinking about that. I should probably make sure whoever hired those outlaws does not try again. Stick around until we know you are safe." And after that, another pause. "I do not know. What would you want me to do?" Victoria's heart hammered. "I would want you to stay. Help me build my father's dream, that homestead outside of Fargo. It is too much for one person, but 2 people could make it work." She took a breath. "But I know you are a drifter. I know staying in one place probably sounds like a prison to you. So I would understand if you wanted to move on." Dalton's arm tightened around her waist. "Victoria, look at me." She turned as much as she could in the saddle to meet his eyes. They were serious, intense, full of something that made her breath catch. I have been drifting because I had nothing to stay for, he said. No family, no purpose beyond the next job. But these past 2 days with you, fighting to keep us both alive, that felt like purpose. That felt like home, even in the middle of hell. So yes, I would stay. If you are asking me to stay, then I am saying yes. I am asking, Victoria whispered. I am asking you to stay, to build a life with me, to see where this goes between us. Dalton cupped her face in his hand, his thumb brushing across her cheekbone. Then I am staying. For as long as you will have me. He kissed her then, soft and gentle despite the desperation of their situation. Victoria melted into it, her hand coming up to grip his shirt, anchoring herself to him. The kiss was a promise, a beginning, a declaration that they were in this together now. When they broke apart, both of them were smiling despite everything. We should probably focus on staying alive first, Victoria said, a bit breathless. Probably, Dalton agreed, but he kissed her once more before turning his attention back to the trail. They reached the outskirts of Fargo late in the afternoon of the following day, the town spread out along the Red River of the North. It was a bustling place, full of new construction and people. The railroad had come through a few years back, bringing commerce and settlers. Victoria felt a rush of relief at seeing civilization again, safety in numbers. Dalton guided them straight to the marshal's office, a solid building near the center of town. The marshal was a grizzled man in his 50s named Tom Reeves, who listened to Victoria's story with growing concern. She told him everything about the wagon train massacre, about the 3 outlaws who had hunted her, about Dalton's rescue and their escape. Marshal Reeves took notes, his expression darkening. This is the 2nd wagon train hit in the past month. We have been hearing rumors about land claims being targeted, but nothing concrete until now. He looked at Victoria. You said your father had filed a claim. Yes, just outside of town. I should inherit it. We will get that sorted out. First thing is to get you somewhere safe while I round up a posse. Those outlaws are still out there, and if what you say about them being hired is true, we have got a bigger problem than a few killers. He turned to Dalton. You did good work keeping her alive. You willing to ride with the posse? I am willing to testify to what I saw and help however I can, Dalton said carefully, but my priority is making sure Victoria stays safe. Fair enough. I will put you both up at the hotel until we sort this out. No charge. Least the town can do for what you went through. The hotel was a welcome luxury after days of running and hiding. Victoria nearly cried when she saw the bathtub, and the hotel staff brought up hot water for her. While she soaked, washing away the dirt and blood of the past few days, Dalton met with the marshal to go over details and make a formal statement. When he returned to their adjoining rooms, Victoria was clean and dressed in a simple dress the hotel had provided, her hair still damp. She looked more like herself, though the shadows remained in her eyes. The marshal is putting together a posse to ride out tomorrow, Dalton reported. He sent a telegram to the territorial governor's office about the situation. They are taking this seriously. That is good. Victoria moved to the window, looking out over the town. It feels strange to be here. My father talked about Fargo so much in his letters, painted it as this place of new beginnings. Now I am here without him, without any of them. Dalton came to stand beside her, not touching but close enough that she could feel his warmth. I know it does not make it better, but you survived to carry on their dream. That counts for something. Does it? She looked at him, the grief threatening to overwhelm her now that they were safe and she had time to feel it. They are all dead, Dalton. My mother, my father, my little brother. All those families, children, gone because someone wanted land badly enough to murder for it. He pulled her into his arms then, and Victoria finally let herself cry. She had been holding it together through sheer necessity, but now it all came pouring out. Dalton held her through it, his hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet comfort. He did not tell her it would be okay or that time would heal all wounds. He just held her and let her grieve. When the storm of tears finally passed, Victoria felt wrung out but also clearer, like some of the poison had been lanced from the wound. She pulled back enough to look up at Dalton. "Thank you for everything. I would not have made it without you. You are stronger than you think, but I am glad I was there." He brushed a strand of damp hair from her face. "And I am glad I am here now. Are you really going to stay, build a homestead with me?" "It is hard work and there is no guarantee of success." "I am really going to stay. I have done hard work before. At least this time I will have a reason beyond just getting paid." His eyes held hers. "I will have you." Victoria rose on her toes and kissed him, pouring into it all the gratitude and affection and hope she felt. Dalton responded in kind, his arms tightening around her, and for a moment the grief receded, replaced by the promise of something new and good growing from the ashes of tragedy. Over the next several days, things began to settle into place. The marshal's posse rode out and returned with 2 of the outlaws captured. The third, the one Dalton had shot in the darkness, had died of his wounds. The prisoners confirmed that they had been hired by a man named Silas Grantham, a speculator who had been buying up land claims through questionable means. Grantham was arrested, and his entire operation began to unravel under the marshal's investigation. Victoria went to the land office and confirmed her inheritance of her father's claim. The land agent, a nervous man who seemed relieved about Grantham's arrest, processed the paperwork quickly. Victoria's name went on the deed, making her the official owner of 160 acres of prime farmland just outside of Fargo. Dalton accompanied her to see the land for the first time. They rode out on a clear September morning, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. The property was beautiful, rolling fields with good soil, a creek running through one corner, and a small stand of cottonwood trees that would provide lumber and shade. In the distance, they could see the smoke from neighboring homesteads. "My father chose well," Victoria said, taking it all in. "This is good land." "It is," Dalton agreed. "We can start with a small cabin, get something built before winter, then plant in the spring. It will be tight the first year, but we can make it work." The word filled Victoria with warmth. They had been through so much together in such a short time, but it felt right, like they had been heading toward this moment all along. "I have some money saved from my work on the cattle drives," Dalton continued. "Enough to buy lumber and supplies. With both of us working, we can have a cabin up in a few weeks. Both of us working. You do not think I am going to build it alone while you sit around looking pretty, do you?" There was teasing in his voice. "I have seen you handle a rifle and outsmart outlaws. I am betting you can swing a hammer just fine." Victoria laughed, the sound surprising her. She had not thought she would be able to laugh again so soon after everything, but here she was, standing on her family's land with a good man beside her, and the sound came naturally. "I can swing a hammer. My father taught me basic carpentry, said every person should know how to build and fix things." "Smart man." Dalton dismounted and helped her down. They walked the property together, making plans, talking about where to position the cabin for the best light and protection from winter winds, where to dig a well, where to plant the first crops. It was mundane planning, ordinary talk about ordinary things, but it felt like magic after the terror of the past week. As the sun climbed higher, they sat together under the cottonwoods, looking out over the land that would be their home. Dalton's hand found Victoria's, their fingers intertwining. "I need to tell you something," Victoria said quietly. When we were running, when you were fighting to keep us alive, I kept thinking that if I survived, I wanted to live differently. Not just survive, but really live. Build something meaningful. And I realized I wanted to build it with you. Dalton turned to face her fully. I have been thinking the same thing. These past days with you, they have meant more to me than the last 8 years combined. You make me want to stop drifting, to put down roots and see what grows. Is that your way of saying you are falling in love with me? Victoria asked, her heart pounding. It is my way of saying I have already fallen. Somewhere between pulling you onto my horse and watching you face down killers without flinching, I fell completely in love with you, Victoria Malone. And I know it is fast, and I know we barely know each other in the regular way, but I have never been more certain of anything in my life. I love you too, Victoria said, the words spilling out with relieved joy. I love you, and I want to build this life with you, and I do not care if people think it is too fast. I know what I feel. Dalton kissed her then, deep and passionate, and Victoria felt the last pieces of her broken heart begin to knit back together. She would always grieve her family, would always carry the weight of what happened to them, but she was not going to let that tragedy define her entire life. She was going to honor their memory by living fully, by building the dream they had died pursuing. They returned to town and made their plans official. The town clerk married them in a simple ceremony 3 days later, with Marshal Reeves standing as witness. Victoria wore a simple blue dress purchased from the general store, and Dalton wore his cleanest shirt and a new vest. There were no flowers or fancy trappings, but when Dalton slipped a simple gold band onto her finger and kissed her as her husband, Victoria felt like the luckiest woman alive. They spent their wedding night at the hotel, and Dalton was gentle and patient, making Victoria feel cherished and safe. In the morning, they loaded a wagon with lumber and supplies and headed out to their land to begin building their future. The work was hard, exactly as hard as Dalton had warned. They worked from sunup to sundown, cutting and fitting logs for the cabin walls, raising the structure beam by beam. Dalton taught Victoria things her father had not, the finer points of notching logs so they fit together tightly, how to read wood grain to know where it would split. Victoria proved to be a quick learner and a tireless worker, and together they made steady progress. Neighboring homesteaders stopped by to help with the heavy work, the tradition of barn raisings extending to cabin construction. A family named Peterson from the next property over brought food and tools, and their 3 teenage sons helped lift the roof beams into place. A couple named Harrison rode over with extra nails and tar paper. The community was welcoming, eager to help new settlers get established. Within a month, the cabin was finished. It was small, just 1 room with a loft for sleeping, but it was solid and well built. They had a cast iron stove for cooking and heat, a good bed frame that Dalton constructed himself, a table and chairs. It was home. Their first night in the cabin, they lay in the loft listening to the wind whisper through the cottonwoods and the creek babble nearby. Dalton held Victoria close, his hand resting on her stomach. "I still cannot believe this is real sometimes," he said quietly. "A month ago I was drifting, and now I have a wife and a home and a future. Do you regret it? Giving up your freedom? This is not giving up freedom. This is finally being free from the emptiness. I was not free before, Victoria. I was just lost." He kissed her temple. "You found me, or I found you. Either way, I am exactly where I am supposed to be." Victoria turned in his arms to face him. "I love you, Dalton Nash. I love you more every day." "I love you too. And I am going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret taking a chance on a drifter with nothing but a horse and a rifle. You had more than that. You had a good heart and steady hands and courage. That was everything I needed." Winter came hard to North Dakota, but they were prepared. Dalton had worked enough northern cattle drives to know what was required. They had laid in supplies, stockpiled firewood, and made sure the cabin was well chinked against the cold. When the first snow fell in November, they were snug and safe inside. The winter months were long but not unhappy. They read by lamplight, books borrowed from the small lending library in Fargo. They played cards and told stories. Dalton taught Victoria to carve wood, and she made small figures of animals that lined the windowsill. They made love and talked about the future, about the crops they would plant in spring, about maybe building a larger house someday, about children. In February, Victoria realized she was pregnant. She told Dalton on a cold morning when fresh snow was falling, and the look of pure joy on his face made her cry happy tears. He held her carefully as though she might break, then laughed and spun her around despite her protests. "We are going to have a baby," he kept saying, wonder in his voice. "We are going to be a family." "We already are a family," Victoria corrected gently. "Now we are just expanding it." Spring came eventually, as it always did, and with it the hard work of planting. Dalton broke the soil with a plow borrowed from the Petersons, and Victoria followed behind planting seed. They put in wheat and corn, a kitchen garden with vegetables, and Victoria insisted on a small plot of flowers because life needed beauty as well as sustenance. As her pregnancy progressed, Dalton became increasingly protective, insisting she not work too hard, bringing her water constantly, making sure she rested. Victoria found it both endearing and occasionally frustrating, but she understood it came from love. He had lost his family once. He was determined to keep this one safe. The baby came in October, a healthy boy with a strong cry in his father's blue eyes. They named him Thomas, after Victoria's brother. Dalton held his son with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face, and Victoria knew that whatever remaining pieces of his broken past still haunted him. They were being healed in this moment. The following years brought both challenges and joys. The farm prospered, their crops doing well enough that they could expand their acreage and buy livestock. They built a proper barn and added on to the cabin, giving them more room. 2 years after Thomas, Victoria gave birth to a daughter they named Catherine, and 2 years after that, another son they called Daniel. Dalton proved to be a wonderful father, patient and loving, teaching his children everything he knew about working the land, riding horses, reading the weather. Victoria started the small school she had always dreamed of, teaching not just her own children but those of neighboring homesteaders. The community grew around them, more families settling the area, and they were part of it, woven into the fabric of this new place. On their 10th wedding anniversary, they stood together in the same spot under the cottonwoods where they had first talked about their future. The cabin was now a proper house, painted white with blue shutters. The barn was full of healthy animals. Their 3 children were playing near the creek, their laughter carrying on the wind. "Remember when you said you would slow me down?" Dalton asked, his arm around Victoria's waist. "I remember you said we would go slow together," Victoria replied, leaning into him. "And you were right. This has been the best slow journey of my life. I kept my promise, did I not? Every single promise." Victoria turned to kiss him, this man who had saved her life and then built a life with her. "Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for helping me when you had every reason to ride past. I could never have ridden past you. Something in my heart knew, even then, that you were what I had been searching for all those years." He pulled her closer. "My compass finally found true north." As the sun set over their land, painting everything in golden light, their children ran up demanding dinner, and they all walked back to the house together. Inside, Victoria prepared the meal while Dalton helped the children wash up, the domestic routine comfortable and familiar. They ate together at the large table Dalton had built, talking about the day, making plans for tomorrow. After the children were in bed, Dalton and Victoria sat on the porch, watching the stars emerge. These were the moments Victoria treasured most, the quiet peace after a full day, the solid presence of her husband beside her, the knowledge that they had built something real and lasting from the ashes of tragedy. "You ever think about that week?" Victoria asked. "When we were running for our lives, sometimes. Usually when I am looking at what we have now, realizing how easily it might never have happened if things had gone differently." Dalton took her hand, the gesture as natural now as breathing. "But I try not to dwell on it. We survived. We built something good. That is what matters." "My father would have liked you," Victoria said softly. "He would have been proud of what we have done with his dream." "I hope so. I like to think I am living in a way that would make both our families proud. Making something that lasts, raising children right, being part of a community." He looked at her. "Being the husband you deserve. You are more than I ever dared to hope for. When you pulled me onto your horse that day, I thought I was just being saved from death. I did not know I was being saved for life. A real life, full and rich and worth living." They sat in comfortable silence for a while longer, then headed inside to their own bed. Tomorrow would bring more work, more challenges, more of the everyday struggles of farming and raising children. But they would face it together, as they had faced everything since that fateful day in the Dakota badlands. Years continued to pass, measured in harvests and holidays, in children growing and the farm expanding. Thomas grew into a serious young man who loved working the land as much as his father did. Catherine proved to have her mother's gift for teaching and started helping with the school. Daniel was the adventurous one, always exploring, always asking questions about the world beyond their farm. When Thomas was 18, he announced his intention to file for his own claim on land adjacent to theirs, wanting to expand the family holdings. Dalton helped him with the paperwork, taught him everything he needed to know about starting from scratch. Victoria watched her firstborn become a man and felt both pride and the inevitable sadness of letting go. Catherine, at 16, fell in love with a young man from a neighboring farm, the eldest Peterson boy. Victoria and Dalton watched the courtship with careful eyes, but the young man was respectful and hardworking, and they eventually gave their blessing. The wedding was held on their farm, under the cottonwoods, and Victoria cried watching her daughter make the same promises she had made so many years before. Daniel, at 14, announced he wanted to be a surveyor, to map the territories and help other families find good land. It was so different from the farming life Dalton and Victoria had built, but they encouraged him, knowing that each child needed to find their own path. On the 20th anniversary of that day in the Badlands, Victoria and Dalton rode back to the area where they had first met, where she had stumbled into the open bleeding and desperate. It had taken planning to make the trip, leaving the farm in Thomas's capable hands for a few days, but it felt important to mark the occasion. The land looked different now, more settled, with homesteads dotting the landscape that had been empty before. They found the spot easily enough, the rock formation unchanged. They stood together, remembering. "I was so scared," Victoria said. "I thought I was going to die out here." "I was scared too," Dalton admitted. "Scared I would not be fast enough, smart enough, good enough to keep you alive. Scared I would lose someone else I cared about. But you were enough. You were everything." Victoria leaned against him. "Do you ever regret it? Giving up the drifting life, not for a single moment?" "Every good thing in my life came from stopping that day, from deciding to help you, from choosing to stay." He turned her to face him. "You are my home, Victoria. You always have been from the moment I saw you. Everything else, the farm, the children, all of it is wonderful, but you are the center. You are what made me want to build a life instead of just passing through one." "I love you," Victoria said, the words as true now as they had been 20 years ago. "I love you exactly as much as I did when we were young and building our first cabin, and I love you more than I can express for all the years we have had together." "Then we will go slow," Dalton said, echoing the words he had spoken so long ago. "Together, for as long as we have." They kissed under the Dakota sun, two people who had found each other in the worst of circumstances and built the best of lives. When they rode back toward home, toward their farm and their children and their future, they rode together as they always had. The years that followed were gentler. Dalton and Victoria eased into being grandparents when Thomas married and had children of his own. Catherine gave them grandchildren too, and even Daniel, after years of surveying the territories, came home with a wife and settled down to raise his family near his parents. The farm remained prosperous, though they hired help as they grew older, no longer able to do all the heavy work themselves. But they still woke early, still walked their land together in the mornings, still made plans for the next season. The house was full of grandchildren on holidays, chaos and laughter echoing off the walls. On their 40th wedding anniversary, the whole family gathered for a celebration. 3 generations filled the house and spilled out onto the porch and yard. There was food and music and dancing. Dalton and Victoria sat together, watching it all, marveling at what they had created. 40 years, Victoria said. "It seems impossible." "Best 40 years of my life," Dalton replied. His hair was white now, his face deeply lined, but his eyes were the same blue that had caught her attention that first day. "I would not change a single moment, not even the scary ones, running from outlaws, nearly dying in that lined shack, not even those. They were part of the journey. They brought us here." He gestured at the celebration around them. "Look what came from that terrible day. All these people, all these lives. Your father's dream did not die with him. It grew into something bigger than he could have imagined." Victoria felt tears prick her eyes. "I like to think he knows somehow, that they all know what came from their journey, even though it ended so badly for them. If they can see, they are proud. I am certain of it." Dalton took her hand, raising it to his lips. "Thank you for letting me be part of this. Thank you for trusting a drifter who had nothing. You had everything that mattered." Victoria squeezed his hand. "And you gave it all to me. Your heart, your strength, your devotion. I am the lucky one, Dalton Nash." They watched the sun set together, surrounded by family, anchored in the life they had built. It had not been easy, but it had been good, rich with meaning and purpose. They had faced troubles over the years, bad harvests and illness, the usual struggles of life, but they had faced them together, keeping the promise they had made under duress in a smoke-filled lined shack. Together always. As twilight deepened into night and stars emerged overhead, their children and grandchildren gathered around them, asking for the story they always asked for at family gatherings. The story of how Dalton and Victoria met, how they survived against impossible odds, how they built everything that came after. Dalton looked at Victoria, silently asking permission, and she nodded. Together, taking turns, they told the story. They did not spare the hard parts, the tragedy of the wagon train or the terror of being hunted. But they focused on the courage, the determination, the moment when 2 strangers chose to trust each other, and that trust became everything. When they reached the part where Victoria had said she would slow him down and Dalton had replied that they would go slow together, their youngest grandchildren asked what that meant. Victoria smiled and explained. It means that you do not leave people behind just because things get hard. It means that being together is more important than being fast or efficient. It means that love is patient and kind and willing to adjust to make sure everyone is cared for. She looked at Dalton. Your grandfather taught me that. He showed me through his actions that I was worth slowing down for, worth fighting for, worth building a life around. And I hope we have taught all of you the same thing. Never leave people behind. Go slow when you need to. Stay together always. The family sat in reverent silence for a moment, absorbing the lesson. Then the youngest grandchildren demanded to hear about the escape from the line shack, and the mood lightened as Dalton described their dramatic flight through the darkness. Later, after the guests had gone home and the house was quiet, Dalton and Victoria prepared for bed. They moved slowly now, their bodies aged, but they still helped each other, still exchanged gentle touches and soft words. In bed, Victoria rested her head on Dalton's shoulder as she had for 40 years. You think we did well? She asked. With our lives, with our family. I think we did better than well. I think we did exactly what we were meant to do. Dalton kissed the top of her head. I think your family would be proud. I know mine would be. I think so too. Victoria closed her eyes, content. I love you, Dalton. I love you too, Victoria. Always have, always will. They drifted off to sleep together, as they had every night for 4 decades, secure in the knowledge that their love had created something lasting. In the morning, they would wake to another day on the farm they had built, surrounded by the family they had raised, living the dream that had cost Victoria's family their lives, but had ultimately honored their sacrifice. The next several years passed peacefully. Dalton and Victoria grew older but remained active, still involved in the farm operations even as their children took on more responsibility. They were pillars of the community, respected for their hard work and generosity, known for always being willing to help neighbors in need. When Dalton's health began to fail in his 72nd year, Victoria nursed him with the same fierce devotion he had shown her in that line shack so long ago. The doctor said his heart was simply worn out from a lifetime of hard work, that there was nothing to be done but make him comfortable. Victoria refused to accept that at first, trying every remedy, every treatment. But eventually, she understood that their time together was drawing to a close. On a warm September afternoon, 54 years after they had met, Dalton lay in their bed with Victoria beside him, holding his hand. Their children and grandchildren had been in and out all day, saying their goodbyes, but now it was just the two of them. I am not ready to let you go, Victoria said, tears streaming down her face. I know that is selfish, but I am not ready. I know, love, I am not ready either. Dalton's voice was weak but steady. But we have had a good run, have we not? 54 years. 3 children, 11 grandchildren, 2 great-grandchildren so far. We built something that will last long after we are gone. I know we did, but I still want more time with you. I will wait for you, Dalton promised. Wherever I am going, I will wait, and we will go slow together again in whatever comes next. Victoria kissed him, tasting salt from her tears. I love you. I have loved you from the moment you pulled me onto your horse. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. I love you too. You gave my life meaning, Victoria. You turned a lonely drifter into a husband and father and grandfather. You made me whole. His grip on her hand tightened slightly. Thank you for everything. For trusting me, for loving me, for building this life with me. Thank you for stopping that day. Thank you for saving me in every way a person can be saved. They stayed like that, holding each other, whispering memories and love, until Dalton's breathing slowed and finally stopped. Victoria held him for a long time after, memorizing the feel of him one last time, saying a final goodbye to the great love of her life. The funeral was well attended, the church packed with family, friends, and neighbors who had all been touched by Dalton's kindness and integrity. Victoria stood strong through it, supported by her children, determined to honor him with her strength the way he had always honored her with his. She lived another 7 years after Dalton's death, years spent with her family, helping raise great-grandchildren, teaching in the school until her 80s, remaining active in the community. But everyone could see that part of her was missing, that she was waiting to be reunited with her beloved husband. When Victoria's time came, it was peaceful. She simply went to sleep one night and did not wake, passing in the house she and Dalton had built, surrounded by evidence of the life they had created together. Her children found her in the morning, a small smile on her face, and they knew she had gone to find Dalton, to continue their journey together. They buried her next to him under the cottonwoods where they had first made their plans, where they had celebrated anniversaries, where they had always found peace. The farm stayed in the family, passed down through the generations, each one adding to the legacy while honoring the foundation Dalton and Victoria had laid. And on quiet mornings, when the wind whispered through the cottonwoods and the creek babbled nearby, people swore they could feel the presence of those two souls, still together, still going slow, still deeply in love after all the years and all the struggles and all the triumphs. Their story became family legend, told and retold, a reminder of what was possible when two people chose to face the world together, when love and courage combined to build something lasting. The farm still stands today, worked by the descendants of that cowboy and the woman he saved, a testament to a promise made in desperate circumstances and kept through a lifetime of devotion. Go slow together, always. It became the family motto, carved into the wooden sign that hangs over the ranch entrance, a reminder of where they came from and what matters most in the end. That terrible day in the Dakota badlands had birthed not just survival, but a legacy of love that spanned generations. Victoria Malone and Dalton Nash had taken the worst moment of their lives and transformed it into the foundation of something beautiful and lasting. They had proven that even in darkness, light can be found, that even in tragedy, love can bloom, and that the best way through life is together, slowly and steadily, never leaving anyone behind. Their story lived on, not just in the memories of those who knew them, but in the values they had instilled, the love they had demonstrated, and the family they had created. And somewhere in whatever comes after this life, two souls walk together still, hand in hand, going slow together always, just as they had promised.